Hey guys, good to see you.
Likewise.
I'm just going to give a little introduction and then hand it over to these guys and let them share their backgrounds, their experiences, and then we'll get into some of the, I guess, or just an open discussion, which I'm going to try and guide in whatever direction it goes, I guess. And luckily they agreed to do that, so looking forward to this. The most expensive mistake we can make in climate investing is confusing generosity and quantity with impact. For generations, family capital in India has met climate through philanthropy, grants, CSR, donations. That matters, it always will. It's no longer where the real leverage lies. The scale we are trying to finance is staggering. India needs $1.5 to $2.5 trillion by 2030. That's in 3.5 years' time, to stay on track to get to net zero by 2070, which is 20 years after everyone else. And on a combined basis, $22.7 trillion we need between now and 2070. We don't have that. Financing gap is about $6.5 trillion. Climate philanthropy accounts for about 0.5% of that and meets 10% of the need. Doubling, tripling, quadrupling, 10 times, not going to close the gap. It's not a question of giving more, it's a question of deploying capital differently, which is the same argument that I sort of started making earlier. Family capital, and I would also argue patient long-term fund capital, is uniquely suited to this movement in 3 ways. Patient, flexible, conviction. Climate assets are not 5-year stories, they're 20-year compounders. An investor, and that includes family offices and investors like yourselves, because I think we think very similarly, can move across grants, equity, concessional debt, guarantees within the same project, right? We can use different things at different times. And move with speed and clarity and have, I think, more cordial relations than a lot of other investor and stakeholder groups. The hard truth is, between 2021 and 2024, climate tech became the largest theme in Indian family office impact investing. 35% of deals, 28% of values. But of the 300 plus families that entered the space, only about 60 remain. 80% walked away. Why? They write a single check, there's no strategy, no conviction. They do it because it's the hot thing to do. And that, frankly, is flushing capital down the toilet, as far as I'm concerned. Today, I want us to move past the diagnosis and into practice. And we have people on this panel who actually decide where capital goes, why it goes there, how to deploy it, and can talk about real-world results. So with that, I will allow my colleagues, my friend Samir and to introduce themselves, give you a little background, and then we'll kick off. Please, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Guneet. You have set the stage very well for this discussion. And as you also said, the problem is well stated. So I think what we should try to do is try to see how we address this problem. So maybe I'll just spend 2 minutes talking about what we do at Peak, and then get into more discussions as the conversation progresses. So at Peak Sustainability Ventures, we are a firm, and I intentionally use the word firm, focused only on sustainability and climate. We have a fund which invests in 4 areas, which is new energy, which includes a combination of energy efficiency, solar tech, basically other forms of energy and energy savings and batteries, etc. We do food systems. The third is water, which we believe is very important, and the fourth is climate. And as Guneet mentioned, we invest also with a dual lens, actually. It has to be a financial return, plus it has to create positive externalities for climate. And if either of these parameters are not met, we don't invest. I think before the fund started, we have perhaps the unique distinction of having invested in 2 very large listed companies. One is Wabag, Viatech Wabag, which is an investment for over, I would say, 20 years now. So goes to the long-term nature of the investment. And the second is I had the privilege of being on the board of Wari Energies for 7 years and saw that grow from 200 megawatts to 16 gigawatts of power of solar. So I think we have enough experience in the space. And the reason I made the distinction between the fund and the firm is we do things at the firm level, at the fund level, but as Guneet mentioned, all serious issues in climate in India are not solved by VC investments. That doesn't work for everything. It works for some, but not for the others. So we have launched 2 ideas or 2 platforms. One is with Viatech Wabag, where we want to take the biogas from 100 wastewater plants across India, Africa, and the Middle East, and convert it to CBG or bio-CBG to basically for use in industry and transportation. The first project was announced last month, actually very close to Delhi in Ghaziabad, where we did a public-private partnership with them to convert this into CBG. The second one is to address the issue of agricultural waste, which we'll get into in detail. And that too was with Arvind Mills. So I think the messaging is that the model requires us to partner with large players who can scale this. Because as Guneet mentioned, if things don't scale and remain subscale, it doesn't address the issue on climate. It has to be able to say, look, not today, and not in 25 years, but in a few years, it has to demonstrate the potential to scale and magnify outcomes, actually. So we'll get into some more detail, but that's what we do at Peak.
Great. Thanks, Guneet. Thanks, Samir. I'm Akhil Jain. I think Guneet started with a very interesting point, which I will build on. And I would argue, despite the climate noise, which you see quite a bit around these days, climate itself is not an investment thesis. It is a tailwind where to invest into. Quick introduction, I am Akhil Jain. I co-lead a decarbonization fund at Fullerton Fund Management. We are an asset management firm managing third-party capital, majority owned by Temasek, the sovereign wealth fund of Singapore. We've been around for 23 years as an institution, managing different classes of capital, which is different asset classes across fixed income, listed equities, private equity. From this decarbonization fund, we are investing in both Southeast Asia and India. What we do is very complementary to what Samir and Guneet. So I think we think of it as a relay. We provide growth capital. We are not playing in the venture space or not taking technology bets. We are coming into companies once the commercial thesis is proven. There is a certain scale to start with, and then helping demonstrate that those companies can scale from, say, $50 million in revenues to $500 million, and make them ready for an IPO or large private equity firms to come in. We take minority stakes in these companies, mostly 10 to 50% equity stakes. Yeah. That's it.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to ask a question which kind of relates to why 80% of the initial companies left. Why did you guys stay? And what's your conviction in this sector?
Sure. I'll answer the last question first, actually. My conviction on this sector is tremendous. Just like you, I believe in this. People ask me, how long am I going to do this? And my answer is for the rest of my life.
Yep, absolutely.
It goes beyond this one. I think we are on the foothills of this opportunity. I think what has been shown here is that there are just so much avenues of growth. And I think if I were to further dissect the investments in India, if I take out solar and EVs, there's very little that remains. And what needs to happen is that the landscape needs to widen. Just to correct you, actually, we do 1 to 10. We are not 0 to 1. So we take tech risks, but it's not like at a lab scale. We grow. We are in the growth phase, but slightly earlier than yourself. But I think to answer your question, Guneet, I think the opportunity is tremendous. Yeah. And the one way we think about it, and you mentioned India capital, I think we are looking at this as a global situation. I am actually looking to build a global firm out of Mumbai. Gone are the days when this should belong only to London and New York and Hong Kong. And climate is global, technology is global. So we act as an institutional bridge. If you look at our portfolio, we have some companies which are overseas companies, which we are scaling in India. We are in discussions with one company doing energy efficiency in HVAC systems with some of the top industry leaders in India and soon to be publicized. And we have another company doing plastics, which has been announced by one of the very large companies out of Delhi, but they'll let them announce it before I speak about it. And at the same time, we work with Indra Water, which is a company out of IIT Mumbai, selling their product, which is hardware plus software, to Unilever in Indonesia, in Vietnam, and Mexico. So I think we have to think globally and look at best-in-class solutions wherever they are. And to answer your question about why investors have fled, I just think that sometimes the micro should not drive the macro. If you made a bad decision on a specific investment, and I don't think there were many climate funds at that time, so they may have invested in a venture which failed. I mean, there's a company called Blue Smart in Delhi, which comes to mind. But I think to extrapolate from one failure to say, look, the entire sector is to be stayed away from, is a bad idea, in my view, of course. And I am biased, given where I sit. But at the same time, I think, thinking carefully, thinking strategically, thinking deeply, and having a long-term vision will get returns that are significant, as well as I think you have a view to say, look, I think the answer to your question is like, do you think we inherited the world from our forefathers or we have borrowed it from our grandchildren? And the answer to that question determines how you think seriously about finding solutions that are long-term, suited for India at Indian price points, and drive change in a way that is significant and necessary. And necessary as in, as you said, 6 years. It's not necessary in 25 years.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a concept of planetary boundaries, and if you cross planetary boundaries excessively, then there's no coming back. And I think that's something that we need to be very mindful about, actually.
Yeah, thanks, Samir. I just going to touch on a few points that Samir made. I think on the planetary boundary side, I mean, we've crossed 6 already. We temporarily crossed the 7th this year. And had we not gotten back, we would have been done, right? If we cross the 7th planetary boundary permanently, there's no coming back, and humanity's got a ticking clock over its head. So this is how real it is, guys. I mean, the planet's on fire, literally. And people are not going to do anything until the house is burning down, right? So secondly, I think global collaboration, global transparency, global sharing of knowledge, and openness, right? Which is not going to be done by governments or many established corporations. It's going to be done by people like us sitting in this room, right? And so, similar to you, we've got a number of international firms who are large-scale, proven technologies that we're bringing into India.
And as you mentioned, I mean, India is still growing at a pace which is, as a large economy, one of the highest.
Yep. But we lack capital, and that's the fundamental block. And the only way that changes is everybody in this room want to come lobby RBI and SEBI with me. But so the 2 companies that we've got mandates to bring in this year, they're going to be massive, massive projects. The pilots themselves will be $250 million. That's not a venture deal. It can't be. It's got to be a blended finance structured, right, over multiple years. And the impact these guys will make is what they target first, not just on the environment, but on the society and in terms of governance for the entire sector, right? So trying to recreate how business is done by using best-in-class examples, right? And showing rather than talking, right?
Just one quick rejoinder before. So I think in terms of what you said, the flexibility of capital. So this project that we are doing with Viatech Wabag in Ghaziabad is a joint venture. It is not an investment. So that's talks about the flexibility in terms of forms of capital. And what we are doing with Arvind is a long-term offtake agreement, biomass supply agreement, corporate decarbonization at scale. And the excitement I have is that one is the first in the world where we are doing cotton stock to biocoal. But we'll get into that in a little bit.
No, great. So on the point of, on the question which Guneet asked about conviction, no doubt, I think all of us have a conviction. This is a multi-decade theme. I think there's no question about that. Samir made some interesting points about, and addressing Guneet's earlier question of why a lot of this capital gets stuck, right? Why are these family offices who invested not building onto it, right? And I think the issue arises when climate alone becomes the investment thesis. I think to take the example of electric vehicles, Samir mentioned about a company which everyone talks about. I think, and this is much more relevant for someone like us who are providing growth capital versus venture. When we underwrite investments, we are looking at unit economics, commercial thesis in a lot of detail. And to take the example, we invested in a company called Rootmatic in Bangalore last year. They are into corporate employee transportation, which is a massive industry in India, $6 billion and upwards. What they do is they work with corporate customers, the big IT and the GCC companies, providing transportation for their employees, work to home, home to work. When you talk about decarbonization, urban mobility, and this is very relevant to the theme of this summit, which is clean air. Urban mobility, the first thing which comes to mind is that, like, we believe one of the lowest hanging fruits is corporate commute. This is daily commute, home to work and back. And if there is a way to decarbonize this, not necessarily by electric vehicles, but just by reducing the number of vehicles on the road, that is the first step. And that doesn't need a climate thesis. The unit economics, the decarbonization lies in the inherent economics of the business. The business exists and because there is decarbonization, right? And then you layer electric vehicles on top. So this is so again, just to demonstrate our thesis, this is a company which was beyond venture when we invested. This was already $30 million in revenues and scaling up very profitably. And we provide capital to take this up to the next stage before an IPO or another larger private equity fund coming in.
Thanks. I mean, one point on EVs I'd like to make is, I think the use case you mentioned is exactly spot on. Using it for the right reasons, that technology, because you can't replace every car on the planet with an EV, maybe 5 to 7%, and the mining and the getting the supply chain is totally unsustainable, right? So, in my view, trying to replace every car, every transportation with an EV it's actually destructive to the environment, right? So actually, I fully appreciate your point where targeted uses, yes. Across the board, it doesn't make any sense. You'll solve maybe 5 to 7% of the world's problem, right? And the over-allocation of capital, the FOMO, the herd mentality, there will be an explosion. It reminds me very much of 2001, the tech boom. Anything with a .com, hey, let's throw money at it, right? And frankly, a lot of capital and a lot of companies will not be here post that, my fundamental view. Moving on then, I guess, what do you think we need to do, not just as investors, as a community, and also work with the government to get done in order to really accelerate how we're investing, where we're investing, and the first thing in my mind, and this is something I'm working on with our friend here, Amit, is having a IMM for the entire country. IMM, one standard for the whole country. Without that, you can't add, you can't add up what each impact is being made, right? And so it's a futile exercise, right? So let's assume that gets done. What's next?
Yeah, so I think if I understand your question, you're trying to understand what needs to be done to accelerate the capital and also the impact of investments.
And the allocation of capital to the right areas.
Yeah, so I think there is, it's an excellent question. There is a lot of capital which is available for climate. If I categorize this capital, there are let's say, 3 to 5 different pools. There is venture capital, which again comes in at different stages, different types of capital. There is growth capital where, again, different types of capital. You have DFI capital, you have purely commercial capital, you have the family offices, and then you have the infrastructure funds, which is where the assets are scaling up, the renewable energy assets, or even EV assets these days. And beyond these, you have the blended finance kind of pools, which are separate from these, which are helping either the venture stage assets or the growth capital investments accelerate. I think one of the points which Guneet made earlier was most of the capital has gone into solar and EVs. And that really is because infrastructure, which is the third bucket I mentioned, that is where most of the capital allocation has happened. And that's an area which is proven, that's been around, and the most de-risked. I think there are gaps. I won't say there is lack of capital for climate today. I think the gap is, a gap exists in pockets. And also the gap is business models which can scale up, and the management teams, the governance which can demonstrate scaling up. I don't know if that helps.
Thanks. Yeah.
Fair enough. Thanks, Guneet. So let me approach your question a slightly different way, actually. Sure. To say that, look, you asked a question as to, how do you get more capital into this, and where does this capital need to go?
I mean, there's gates for that capital, right?
So I think we start off with the principle of, you mentioned some very, very big numbers, which I'm not sure India will get, can get, may get. I think one core principle we have is do what you can with what you have today and now. I'm not here waiting for $1 trillion to come in. I think you said, look, I have X, let me do X. If I get 2X, I'll do 2X. Right. I think that's a starting point. Secondly, I think investors, they need to see exits, see returns. I think, while we don't say it publicly, the numbers in Wari are enormous in terms of what public listed exit one can get in these companies. In terms of what is next, actually, we need to focus on decentralized solutions that are suitable for India and work on the principle of local production, local consumption.
Absolutely.
And if I may if you can indulge me to just speak on one of these companies in detail.
Absolutely.
So I think I mentioned this Ghaziabad opportunity. Why is it so important? It took us, if you look at our first public announcement with Wabar, it was in 2024. We signed this agreement in May 2026. So I think goes to your point that it takes a long time. Not only patient capital, it needs patience. Yes. It's not only patient capital, it needs somebody to say, look, I need to get this done. And we were surprised positively by the way the Ghaziabad, the Nagar Nigam responded. And it took longer because it's the first time in India that you have actually a wastewater utility selling their waste and getting actually paid for it. So it's almost like a reverse tipping fee. And that had to go through various permissions, approvals, but both sides were patient, us and the government. And eventually we ended up signing a contract where it is for 6,000 meter cube per day. So given the nature of this event, I thought that was a positive example because, when you emit methane, as many of you may know, or it may have come up earlier, it is 28 times more potent than CO2 for global warming on a 100-year basis. If you take 25 years, then the numbers become much higher. And the second aspect is CO2 can be recaptured through photosynthesis. Methane, once released, kind of is gone. So as a molecule, being as potent as it is, what it does is it improves air quality in Ghaziabad. Secondly, because of the West Asia war, India imports 81% of mobility-related energy needs. If I can substitute wastewater biogas to run my car through CBG, I am actually improving also the energy security, but also the foreign exchange security. We are not have to import it anymore. So the multiplicity of advantages. And what I see in India is that it is very difficult to get the first thing done. But once people see it working, which we are focused on that and seeing that in 8 months this plant will be operational.
Yep.
we see it scaling. So I think one of the other points you mentioned, climate goes like this and then like this. It's not like your average
VC
every. So I think the people who invest in VCs and are looking for the same outcomes, it's apples and oranges.
Absolutely.
I mean, you need to find the, and we want to also find the right VC or right investor or LP who doesn't ask us every day what is happening, whether we don't, things don't happen
what's
every
my
day.
MOIC, what's my DPI, it's like,
The second, just one more example, and then I'll pass it back to you, is a company we backed in 2019. We were the first investor in a company called Metafin Clean Tech Finance. Today, they have 100 megawatts of rooftop solar installs in only rural India. 8,000 installs over 4,000 villages in UP, Bihar, Jharkhand. 65% of first-time borrowers. So it's not only solar, but it's actually financial inclusion, and the diesel saved, and the fact that, effectively in all these villages, you are making it self-sufficient as opposed to waiting for the truck to arrive with the diesel.
absolutely.
And I think these are the kind of things which one needs to envisage, to say, look, yeah, I mean, of course you have to do the larger gigawatt plants, but when you empower 8,000 MSMEs to say, look, I'm substituting your diesel with solar, which you pay back in 3 years, and then you get 26 years of free power. That's a very powerful statement which impacts climate as well as your profitability.
Absolutely. Just how much time do we have left? Anybody got? Okay. I just wanted to make a quick comment based on this, and then we'll open it up to questions from the floor. Totally agree with what Samir said, and we're actually doing something similar in terms of bringing companies with established technology into India and joint venture set up with them, right? Because that opens them up to having an Indian base. So it's a company called Waste Fuels, which is the largest waste to fuel for ships, for planes, for trucks, and hopefully by the end of this year for cars, right? So Maersk, BP, Mark Benioff from Salesforce, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, that's the team behind this company, right? So they are coming in, their pilot is going to be a $170 million project. 170, yeah, right? That's their pilot project. And they want to build 10 of these plants by 2030, producing 1 billion gallons of biofuels. Now the effect on that, they're going to hire 500 million people. They're going to provide housing, education, medical care, and healthcare for the families and of the staff. We're working with the government to find the right location, probably outside Delhi where the mountains of garbage are, and hire the people who live in those, literally garbage hills to come and be our employers. So these guys are serious. Like the impact they at decarbonizing, I think 75 billion tons of carbon each year. So that's the scale of impact we need to be making today. So with that, I'm going to just thank you guys. So open it up for questions. Anybody have any questions? And yeah, these guys can answer.
Hi, I'm Deepak Gupta from Urban Climate Finance. My question is to you, Samir. You mentioned about decentralized opportunities on one hand, and then you talked about this Ghaziabad with thousands, how many metric tons of waste. So which way is capital going? Is it decentralized, or are you going towards large mega crore factories and corporate tie-ups?
I think it's not either or, but both actually. And if you look at what is the government Satat program, that also is decentralized, focused on local consumption, local production. And the other example, which it's on our website, but I didn't get to talk about, was also how do you deal with 500 million tons of biomass that India produces each year. So the project with Arvind is based on the premise that, look, 15% is cotton, and that's used by them. 85% is cotton stock. And if I can convert that into energy, I am doing 100% actually use of what I extract from nature. And I'm replacing coal 1-to-1. And we are bringing this technology called torrefaction. So we are acting as project quote-unquote developer, modifier, IP, investor, and trying to see, and we have got a grant from somebody overseas to see how we can get this done. And Arvind is a supporter. So what I'm saying is, this is to Guneet's point, that one has to think outside the box. If you get stuck in the traditional VC model, it's kind of, it applies, but applies partially. I'm not saying it doesn't apply. Don't misunderstand me, but it applies partially.
So I wonder why you cannot promote a startup which points out at government policies which are hindering driving climate investments. Example, why don't you think there are charging points at hotels and shopping malls? The reason is that they are charged 8 to 10 rupees a unit. And when they supply electricity for charging, then they have to charge GST, and then 18% over. Only as per Gazette notification, only the utilities are exempt from charging. Example. Second, there are many examples, but I'll give you another one. Delhi has something called UBBL, which is Unified Building Bylaws. Now, in the Unified Building Bylaws, there is a clause which says the Delhi government can offer 5% extra FAR if they are green certified buildings, certified by GRIA, or net zero buildings. But this particular clause has not been approved by the Delhi government. Hence, no building has ever in Delhi been given extra FAR at no cost, as an example. Third, there are heat areas in all the various places which have a lot of concrete. A simple thing like painting it with high albedo paint, white paint, reflects off the light into space, and the temperature drops by 5 degrees, etc. So the question is, if by simple means the government would change policy, then the climate investments from the private sector would increase dramatically. The question is, why not set up a startup to point out such small measures, because they are widely covered in different type of industries, not belonging to one only. Thanks.
Do you mind if I take that? See, we're actually working with the government on, we have an AI that's actually pointing out every one of those discrepancies and issues. But the government's not going to move quickly. The government moves when the house is on fire. We're trying to accelerate that with, getting more of you guys involved, and more people who are talking to them. Once we have solutions and tangible solutions, right? We have to come with realistic solutions that can be put into place straight away, and then it'll change, right? But you can't just say, okay, change all these policies, right? Because there'll be knock-on effects through the system, which we won't be aware of. So each one has to be examined in turn. I agree with you. There needs to be a lot more done from the government side, but they're starting, right? This year with the CCTS, 22 crores and 30 crores to NIF investment, right? That's a start towards the climate side. A slow start, but let's give credit where it's due, right? Let's see how they keep going. And I think I have faith in them. Then within the next 5 years, a lot of these hindering policies will be gone. So just
can I add briefly to this? So we invest in other emerging Asian markets as well, and I would argue the policy that you see here in India is actually amongst the best, most favorable for different climate themes. So whether you talk about renewable energy, EVs, biofuels, hydrogen, today, I think the policy which India has is amongst best in class. If you take Europe maybe as an exception, I think it's among the best. So I think that there are these micro issues that you raised, rightly so. As Guneet said, I'm sure they will get ironed out. I think the policy not being, to avoid policy not being used in a negative way by the private sector, but I'm sure these will be ironed out.
I also think it needs to be, the policies need to be changed where they will have the greatest impact. Not micro impact, but macro systemic, countrywide, potentially worldwide. So you start at the top and work down, and sort of something like a policy that affects a small area of a small part of India may not be at the top of their list, but something that affects the entire country, right? So there's a priority to it, and I understand your frustrations, but we've got to prioritize. There's limited time, limited capital. Anybody else? Are we done? All right. Thank you all very much. Thanks, Samir. Thanks.